Hey guys, tonight we begin with the grim, dangerous and not so glamorous world of medieval assassins. Those shadowy figures who crept through castle halls and darkened alleys to change history with a blade and a whisper. While Hollywood makes them look cool, the truth is being a medieval assassin seriously sucked. You probably wouldn't have survived the interview, let alone the first job. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's be clear. You don't just wake up one Tuesday in the year 1250 and decide, you know what, I'd like to stab a nobleman in the throat for 12 silver coins and the distinct honour of hiding in a sewage barrel for 3 days. Becoming an assassin wasn't a career path you chose from a list of options at the village fair somewhere between Cooper and Leper. It was more like the final grimy stop on the life went horribly wrong express. Most people who ended up in this line of work weren't mysterious brooding loners who trained in mountaintop temples. You weren't an orphan of destiny. You were a desperate peasant whose lord had seized your last pig, a disgraced soldier who knew how to kill but had forgotten how to follow orders, or an ex-thief with decent aim and a face so forgettable you could steal a man's purse and he'd still not be able to describe you to the guards. You were someone so far off society's radar that you could make a man disappear and still not be noticed in the next census. If you were well off, you didn't become an assassin. You hired one. If you had a title, a plot of land, or even a single reasonably healthy goat to your name, you were in management. You had assets. You had a future, however bleak. But if your only possession was the tattered tunic on your back, a reputation for solving inconvenient problems, and the uncanny ability to sneak into a tavern without the floorboards groaning, congratulations. You were a prime candidate for a career change. Sooner or later, a nervous man in a slightly too fine cloak would find you in the darkest corner of the inn. He wouldn't make eye contact. He'd just slide a small, heavy coin purse across the sticky table and whisper a name. And that name was never a fun one. You weren't asked to take out Bob the quiet turnip farmer who hummed off key. It was always Baron Raynald, the notoriously corrupt official with a fortress for a home. Bishop Odo, a man of God with far too much gold and a private army. Or Sir Geoffrey, a knight with 12 bodyguards, a suspicious wife, and a moat rumoured to contain an ill-tempered crocodile. The pay was tempting, of course. For someone with nothing, a handful of silver felt like a king's ransom. But the job was horrifying. By the time you even considered it, you had nothing left to lose. No family to miss you, no future to plan for, and definitely no dental plan. The absolute lack of job perks was staggering. There was no pension, no glory, and certainly no evenings off. You couldn't exactly hang up a shingle outside your hovel that read quiet eliminations by appointment. Discretion guaranteed. You just had to stay quiet, move fast, and never ever tell anyone what you did for a living. Especially not loudly over ale at the inn. If anyone asked, you were a travelling merchant. A carpet seller maybe. What about the suspicious stains on your clothes? That's just die. Yes, beat die. Very popular this season. While stories of the Hashashin in Persia, the legendary order of assassins, fueled nightmares across Europe, historians still argue about how much of their disciplined, fanatical organisation was fact versus embellished propaganda. For you, a low-level killer for hire in France or England, there was no mountaintop fortress, no wise mentor, and no promise of paradise. There was just the cold mud, a rusty dagger, and a contract that was as likely to get you killed as it was to get you paid. You weren't the hero of this story. You weren't even the main villain. You were the terrifying, disposable footnote that made everyone else nervous. And the grim truth was, you probably wouldn't live long enough to enjoy the coin anyway. The world had chewed you up and now it was spitting you out dressed in a hood and ready to do its dirty work. Now, let's burst the first and most persistent myth wide open. You didn't train for this, not in any way that Hollywood would recognize. There was no candlelit monastery hidden in a misty valley, no wise grey-bearded mentor teaching you the ancient arts of stealth and pressure points. There was certainly no inspirational flute music playing softly in the background as you practiced your dagger throws. Forget the training montage. There was no teacher, no structured curriculum, and definitely no pep talk before your first mission. If you learned anything, it was by the simple, brutal method of not dying the first few times you tried. Most medieval assassins weren't highly trained professionals. You were a desperate amateur with a decent sense of direction and the ability to climb a wall quietly without sneezing. Your training was the sum of your life's hardships. Did you grow up poaching in the Lord's forest? Then you already knew how to move without snapping a twig and how to wait motionless for hours. Were you a former soldier? Great. That meant you probably knew which end of a knife was the pointy one and how to handle the sight of blood without fainting. If not well, stabbing someone is a fairly intuitive act. It's the escaping afterward, with both of your kidneys still intact, that takes a certain finesse. Or more often, just dumb luck. There were no manuals on assassination, no guild orientation meetings, and certainly no safety briefings. You didn't get a lecture on how to spot a nobleman's body double, or a handy map detailing where most castles kept their emergency exits. You figured it out while hanging from a stone windowsill listening to the guards' footsteps below, and praying you hadn't just crept into the servants' quarters again. Disguise was something you learned on the fly. You'd steal a monk's robe only to realise you didn't know any prayers when questioned. You'd pose as a stable hand only to be confronted by a very large, very angry horse that you had no idea how to calm down. And poison. That was a terrifying game of trial and error, with a heavy, heavy emphasis on error. You didn't have a chemistry set. You had folk knowledge whispers from hedge witches and whatever suspicious-looking plants you could find growing near a graveyard. Sometimes a concoction of nightshade or hemlock worked. More often it just gave your target a mildly upset stomach and made them extremely suspicious of their soup for the rest of their life. On a truly bad day, you'd mix up the cups and poison yourself. There was no medieval poison control hotline to call. Just a fervent hope, some questionable herbal guesswork, and the need for a strong stomach. Sure, if you were lucky, and I mean find a full wineskin on the road, lucky you might have picked up a few skills from associating with thieves or mercenaries. Maybe an older, more seasoned killer in a rare moment of camaraderie showed you how to walk on cobblestones without your boots making a sound. One fringe tidbit from the period is the so-called thieves' grease, a concoction rumoured to be made from the rendered fat of unbaptised children, which was said to make one invisible or able to climb sheer walls. You probably couldn't find any, but you definitely heard the stories. But mentorship wasn't standard practice. It was rare, fleeting, and usually short-lived for one simple reason: assassins don't retire. They just disappear one way or another. Weapons training. Forget it. You weren't a knight practicing with a broadsword in the castle yard. You had a dagger you likely stole off a dead guard, maybe a garrote if you were feeling fancy, and whatever else you could fit under your cloak without it jingling like a jester's hat. You didn't master a weapon, you just got used to its weight in your hand. So no, you weren't some shadowy martial arts master. You were a person with calloused hands, quiet footsteps, and a deeply unhealthy relationship with dark alleyways. Your success didn't come from years of disciplined training. It came from raw, desperate survival. You learned how to kill by doing it quickly, often sloppily, and then vanishing into the night before anyone could get a good enough look at your face to sketch it on a wanted poster and tack it to a church door. In short, your education was brutal practical and offered zero graduation ceremonies. Just a growing collection of bruises, bloodstains, and the creeping cold realization that you were very, very much on your own. Let's talk about the real reason you're in this mess in the first place. Coin. Cold, heavy, jangly, deliciously spendable coin. The promise of it is what convinced you to crawl through a sewer grate at midnight. It's the reason you're currently hiding in a hayloft trying to ignore the fleas and the gnawing voice of moral regret. But here's the grim truth about your chosen profession: you almost always got paid in lies. When someone hires an assassin, they aren't looking for a long-term professional relationship. They don't want to exchange holiday cards or remember your birthday. They want a one-time deniable service with no paperwork and ideally no surviving witnesses. That includes you. The typical offer sounds straightforward enough. A rich merchant or a scheming courtier will offer you a worn leather pouch of silver promising half now, half when the job is done. That's if they're feeling particularly generous. Most of the time they're just feeling treacherous. Here's what "when the job is done" really means. It's code for after we've verified that you didn't mess it up, after we're sure you didn't make us look bad, after we're positive you didn't leave a trail of breadcrumbs that leads directly back to our very comfortable non-imprisoned selves, and most importantly, after we've made certain you won't survive long enough to tell anyone about it. The second half of your payment isn't a reward, it's a lure. So, you do the job. You sneak through the shadows, you risk your life. You dispatch a corrupt baron in his sleep. It's not pretty, it's not poetic. It's a messy, terrifying business involving held breath and the smell of fear. You slip away, heart-pounding, and make your way to the pre-arranged meeting spot to collect your due. And that's when the real danger begins. You arrive at the old mill by the river, only to find it deserted. The client fled. Terribly sorry. Or worse, you arrive and the client is there smiling, along with 3 of his largest, most brutish-looking friends. A knife to the gut is, after all, significantly cheaper than a bonus payment. Dead assassins tell no tales, and more importantly, don't ask for back pay. Even when you do get paid, it's never quite enough. Not for the risk you took, not for the blood on your hands, not for the 3 days you spent hiding in that haystack contemplating your life choices. You get a handful of coins, a curt nod, and a very clear, unspoken reminder, you were never here. Here's a fun fact for you. Some contracts were entirely fake from the start. They were political traps. A rival faction at court might hire you to assassinate someone they claimed was dangerous, only for you to discover it was all a setup. You'd sneak into the target's chambers to find not a sleeping nobleman, but a decoy wide awake with a dozen guards waiting for you. Congratulations. You just walked into a sting operation, and your name is already being carved onto a spot on the gallows. Historians still argue about the extent of these false flag operations, but in a world of constant courtly intrigue, using a disposable pawn to frame an enemy was a common and brilliant political move. You couldn't exactly take your grievances to the authorities. There was no medieval small claims court for disgruntled assassins. Your Honour, I'd like to file a suit against Lord Edmund for breach of a verbal assassination contract. He failed to render the final payment for the permanent removal of his cousin. The only court you'd see was the one where you were the main exhibit, likely in chains. So you learn fast. You learn to take what you can get. You demand as much payment up front as possible, even if it makes the client suspicious. You learn to trust absolutely no one. Not the client, not their messengers, and certainly not the greasy little scribe who swore on his mother's grave that this one job would change your life. He wasn't wrong. It did change your life, mostly by shortening it considerably. Being an assassin meant living on a diet of broken promises and learning to vanish before those promises could break you. Your payment wasn't just the coin, it was the fleeting precious gift of not being double-crossed at this time. So, you've taken the job. You've been lied to about the pay. You're probably going to die. Now let's talk about your equipment. If you're picturing a kit full of gadgets from a fantasy novel or a sneaky video game, you need to lower your expectations drastically. There were no retractable wrist blades, no smoke bombs for a dramatic exit, no enchanted daggers that glowed when orcs were near. You definitely didn't have a crossbow that could be folded neatly into your boot. Your toolkit consisted of whatever you could steal, sharpen or hide beneath your tattered cloak without making a suspicious clanking sound. If you were lucky, and I mean found a gold coin in a dead man's shoe, lucky you might have a good dagger. Not an ornate jewel-encrusted work of art with a curved blade like a dragon's tooth. No, you had a practical ugly piece of steel. Just a sharp, hopefully rust-free blade with a simple wooden or bone handle. Ideally, it was one that didn't still smell faintly of the last guy you had to stab with it. This was your primary tool, your best friend and your last resort. It was good for close work, for cutting a purse string, or for prying open a shuttered window. Its most important quality wasn't its sharpness, but its concealability. Poison, as we've touched on, was a fickle and dangerous part of your arsenal. It existed, sure, but it wasn't the glamorous, slow-acting toxin dripped into a wine goblet that you see in movies. Most medieval poisons were crude, unpredictable concoctions made from plants, minerals, or even animal parts. Aconite, also known as wolfsbane, was a popular choice, as was hemlock. Arsenic was the king of poisons, but it was hard to come by unless you had connections with an alchemist or an apothecary, both of whom would remember your face. The real problem was dosage and delivery. Some poisons worked almost instantly, while others took hours or even days. Some just made your victim vomit spectacularly for 2 days straight, and then recover only now they were angrier and very suspicious of the stew. Ropes and garrots were occasionally useful for a silent kill. You could strangle, climb, or tie something up with a good length of rope, but you'd better know how to use it fast. There's nothing that kills the stealthy mood like wrestling with a struggling nobleman while muttering, "Wait which not, goes under again." The garrote, a simple loop of cord or wire with handles, was brutally effective, but it required you to get terrifyingly close to your target, from behind, a feat that was next to impossible with most high-value individuals. Bows and crossbows, effective yes, but they were hardly the tools of a subtle assassin. They were loud, cumbersome, and incredibly difficult to smuggle into a secure location. You couldn't exactly waltz through a palace gate disguised as a flower arranger while carrying a fully strung longbow. Most assassinations were up close and personal affairs. There was no time for elegant marksmanship from a distant rooftop, just a quick, quiet, and hopefully not too messy encounter in a dark corridor. One quirky fringe tidbit from this era is the concept of a caltrop, a small four-pointed iron device designed so that one point always faces up. While not a killing weapon itself, scattering a handful of these behind you during an escape was a brutally effective way to slow down barefoot or lightly shod pursuers, and you didn't get backups. If your blade bent on a rib, broke on a stone wall, or slipped from your sweaty grasp and fell down a well, it was time to improvise. A slate roof tile with a sharp edge maybe, a rusty nail from a loose floorboard worth a shot, a heavy shoe buckle wielded with malicious intent. Desperate times call for desperate measures. You carried your few precious tools hidden in the hems of your tunic tucked into your boots, or if absolutely necessary, baked inside a hollowed-out loaf of bread. You kept them close, not for a sense of safety, but because in this line of work, your weapon was your best friend, your boss, and your only retirement plan. Historians still debate the existence of specialized guilds that might have provided standardized equipment, but for the average freelance killer, you were on your own. There were no upgrades, no tinkering with gear between missions at a hidden workbench. You didn't polish your kit. You just prayed it wouldn't betray you mid-strike. Because in the end, it wasn't the weapon that did the killing. It was you alone, poorly equipped and expected to perform miracles with little more than a sharpened spoon and a silent prayer. You weren't hired to take out random drunks in back alleys. No one paid you to stab Jeff, the sleepy candlemaker, over a dispute about wick quality. Your targets were important. They were nobles, bishops, wealthy merchants, military officers, and sometimes even royalty. And those people, as you quickly learned, were very, very hard to kill. Their entire existence was a masterclass in paranoia, and for good reason. First, you had to deal with the guards. Not one or two sleepy-eyed men leaning on their spears. We're talking dozens. Armed, armoured, and generally well-fed men whose only job was to stop people like you. Some guarded the main gate. Some patrolled the walls. Some just stood inside the halls, looking intimidating and daring you to blink the wrong way. You'd have to spend days, maybe even weeks, just watching them. You'd memorize their patrol patterns, the distinct creak of a specific door, and exactly how many stairs it took before the older night watchman with a wheezing cough needed to take a breather. This wasn't an action sequence. It was a tedious, nerve-wracking study in human routine. One miscalculation and your mission was over before it began. Second, there were the walls. Castles and manors didn't have welcoming front porches. They had gatehouses, murder holes, and moats. And those moats weren't just pretty water features. They were often filled with stagnant, foul-smelling, water-sharp stakes, and all manner of things that would give you a nasty infection if you fell in. Even if you managed to swim across the moat in the dead of night, you still had to worry about arrow slits overlooking your position, and the very real possibility of a guard dumping a cauldron of boiling oil, or more commonly boiling water or hot sand on your head. Your unofficial job description included the line, "may get flambéed for peeking." Third, and perhaps most deceptively, there were the servants and staff. The cooks, the scullery maids, the scribes, the stable boys. You might think them insignificant, but they were the eyes and ears of the household. They knew everyone and everything. One wrong look from you, one fumbled attempt at pretending you belonged there, and they'd be whispering to the guard captain faster than you could say, "I'm just the new herbalist." You weren't just fighting swords and stone, you were fighting gossip. And medieval gossip, especially when it might earn someone a silver coin for their loyalty travels at the speed of light. And finally, you had your actual target. This person was by definition paranoid. Rightfully so. They were surrounded by ambitious relatives, political backstabbers, and 36 people who had to pretend to like them for a living. They didn't eat a meal without a food taster. They didn't sleep without at least 3 heavy locks on their chamber door. A mainstream historical fact is the sheer complexity of a noble's bedtime ritual, which could involve barring doors, checking for intruders under the bed, and having a trusted guard sleep right outside the room. Some even slept in decoy beds or rotated through different bedchambers, randomly turning your carefully planned infiltration into a deadly version of musical chairs. Don't get too excited if you hear your target is attending a feast. Yes, they'll probably be drunk, but so will everyone else. And you'll still have to get past the royal guards, the lord's personal hounds. Sleeping at his feet, a very alert court jester who notices everything, and 50 other guests who would serve as witnesses. Getting close could take weeks of careful planning. You might have to pose as a servant bribe a chambermaid, or spend an ungodly amount of time hiding in a wine barrel waiting for the right moment. And when that moment finally came, after all the planning and waiting, you had one shot. One precise, perfect, non-squeaky, non-bloody, ghost-like vanishing act. If anything went wrong, if you made a single sound, if the target woke up, you wouldn't just fail. You'd become the next public deterrent swinging from the castle gate with a sign that effectively read "Nice try." The fortress wasn't just the stone and wood, it was the entire system of suspicion built around the person you were paid to kill. So you did it. Against all odds, the plan actually worked. The dagger struck true. The poison was consumed. There were no screams, no alerted guards, just a clean, silent drop to the floor, and a very important person who was now very suddenly not. You feel a surge of, well, probably not pride, more like sheer adrenaline-fueled terror. Congratulations. Now run for your life. Because being a successful assassin in medieval times didn't mean you got to sip wine on a rooftop while watching the city burn behind you. It meant you were fleeing through the grimiest back alleys you could find, with someone's blood on your boots and the sound of a dog already sniffing your trail somewhere in the distance. The job isn't over when the target is dead. That's when the real job begins escaping. There was no victory lap, no post-mission debrief with your colleagues where you could all have a laugh about how close you came to getting caught. There was no casual meeting with your client over a celebratory drink. You didn't even get a single moment to stand back and admire your handiwork. The instant your blade struck your new and only objective became vanishing from a world that now desperately wanted to find you. Every guard in the castle, every servant in the household, every citizen in the town was now your enemy. You had to have planned your exit even more meticulously than the kill itself. Multiple escape routes, a change of clothes stashed in a sewer pipe, a fallback safe house that was probably just a pile of rotting hay in an abandoned barn. Maybe you'd bribed a boatman who owed you a favour, or at least one who was smart enough not to ask questions when a cloaked figure dripping with what might be river water offered him a silver coin. Because you had to assume the city would go on lockdown within minutes. Gates would be slammed shut, armed checkpoints would appear on every major road, and a dozen angry men with swords would all have just received a very rough and likely unflattering sketch of your face, along with the phrase "maybe armed and extremely stabby." And let's not forget about your client. Assuming they even planned to pay you the second half of your fee, they weren't going to meet you at a cosy tavern with a smile and a thank you card. They'd probably already vanished themselves. Because an assassin who has just successfully completed a high-profile job is officially the most dangerous person alive. You know too much. You know who wanted whom dead. You've just proven that you can get into heavily guarded places that no one else can. This makes you a walking, breathing liability. So even after you succeeded, you walked away with a pouch of coin in one hand and a giant invisible target painted on your back. Your own employer might now consider you a loose end that needed tying up. Historians still debate the frequency of this, but the logic is sound. Why risk future blackmail when another small payment could make the problem disappear permanently? It's a chilling thought that the person most likely to order your death was the one who just paid you for your services. And what did you really win? A week of sleeping in freezing lofts, another bribe to a ferry captain to take you across a river, shaving your beard in the dark with a sharp piece of flint and pretending your name is Brother Lucian as you try to blend in with a group of monks heading east. Success didn't mean survival. It just meant you got to start the whole terrifying game over again in a new city, under a new name, with even more people potentially looking for the ghost who killed a baron. You were a rumour, a phantom, and phantoms can't afford to stay in one place for long. The faint metallic smell of the coins in your pouch was a constant reminder of the life you'd taken. It was the price of your anonymity, the cost of your freedom for another few months. So yes, you made the kill. You were a success. Now run like hell and pray you're fast enough to outrun the consequences. Your life as a hunted shadow paid in lies, and living in fear feels uniquely miserable. But as you flee across the muddy fields of medieval Europe, your mind might drift back to tales of another time, another empire, where the most powerful man in the world lived in a prison far more terrifying than any castle. You are no longer an assassin. Now you are a Roman emperor, and you are about to discover that the gilded cage is the most dangerous one of all. Imagine you are on top of the world, not just a king of some damp, foggy island, but the emperor of Rome. You command legions that stretch from the sun-scorched sands of Syria to the misty shores of Britannia. Your face is on every coin. Poets write odes to your wisdom, and architects build temples in your name. You are, for all intents and purposes, the master of the known world. And you have never been in more danger in your entire life. Being a Roman emperor wasn't a job. It was a death sentence with a very fancy inauguration party. Your palace in Rome, perched on the Palatine Hill, isn't a home. It's a fortress disguised as a mansion, and even its marble walls have ears. Every senator who bows to you, every courtier who laughs at your jokes, every guard who salutes you is a potential threat. You don't have friends, you have allies of convenience. You don't have advisors. You have ambitious men waiting for you to show a single moment of weakness. The very systems designed to protect you are the ones most likely to bring about your downfall. The most famous or infamous guard force was the Praetorian Guard. These were your elite personal bodyguards, the best of the best sworn to protect the emperor's life with their own. In theory. In practice, the Praetorians became the ultimate kingmakers and kingbreakers of the empire. They were a deeply political, often greedy and notoriously fickle body of soldiers stationed right in the heart of Rome. If they decided they didn't like your new tax policy, or if a rival offered them a bigger bonus, your reign could end abruptly. A mainstream historical fact is that during the year of the 5 emperors in 193 CE, the Praetorian Guard literally auctioned off the imperial throne to the highest bidder. Your life was in the hands of men who saw you not as a divine ruler, but as a walking treasury. You spend your days navigating a labyrinth of conspiracies. Did that general win his battle too gloriously? He might be getting popular enough to march on Rome. Is that senator too quiet in the council meetings he's probably plotting? Is your own son suddenly showing an interest in military affairs? He might be getting impatient for his inheritance. Paranoia isn't a personality flaw, it's a survival mechanism. You trust no one, and you are right not to. The vastness of your empire is also your greatest weakness. While you are in Rome, a governor in a distant province could be bribing legions to declare him the new emperor. News travelled at the speed of a horse, meaning a full-blown rebellion could be underway for weeks before you even received the first report. You were constantly playing a game of whack-a-mole with usurpers, rebellions, and barbarian incursions, all while knowing that the most immediate threat was likely sleeping in the room next to yours. You might think back to your life as a shadowy assassin, where at least your enemies were clearly defined. Here in this world of perfumed silks and poisoned wine, your enemies smile at you. They praise your name in the forum in the morning, and sharpen their daggers in the evening. The weight of the purple robe, the symbol of your absolute power, feels less like a garment and more like a shroud. You are the most powerful man on earth, and yet you are a prisoner of that very power, locked in a golden cage where every shadow holds a potential killer and every whisper could be your last. The sun sets over the 7 hills of Rome, casting long, menacing shadows across the marble floors of your palace. It's time for dinner, the one part of the day that should be a moment of relaxation. But for you, the Emperor, every meal is a potential plot, every dish a vessel for betrayal. You may have escaped the assassin's life of stale bread and questionable water, but now you're faced with a new kind of culinary terror, the political dinner party. You don't just eat. You preside over a carefully staged theatrical performance where the main event is you not dying. Before a single morsel of food touches your lips, it must pass through a rigorous chain of command. The process begins in the kitchens, a chaotic, steamy world of cooks, slaves and overseers. Every ingredient is inspected. The wine is unsealed in front of trusted officials. But even that isn't enough. The real security starts at the table. Enter the pregustator, your official food taster. This isn't a job for the faint of heart. The taster is a high-stakes guinea pig, often a trusted slave or freedman, whose life is intrinsically linked to yours. He samples every single dish and sips from every single cup before they are presented to you. You watch him closely, not for his culinary approval, but for any sign of distress, a slight tremor, a bead of sweat, a sudden paleness. You wait a prescribed amount of time, after he has eaten, a silent, tense pause in the conversation before you will even consider lifting your own fork. It's an incredibly awkward way to start a meal. Well, Claudius hasn't collapsed into convulsions yet, so I suppose the roasted dormice are safe, past the garum. This practice became so commonplace that it was an accepted part of imperial life. The historian Suetonius tells us that emperors like Claudius and Tiberius were pathologically cautious, employing tasters for everything. But even this system wasn't foolproof. A clever poisoner wouldn't use a fast-acting substance that would take out the taster immediately. They'd use something slow, something that might not show symptoms for hours long, after you've both eaten a full portion. Or they would bribe the taster himself, the ultimate act of betrayal. A truly devious assassin might poison the taster's antidote, making him the only one to die, thus proving the food was safe for you to eat. The fear of poison extended beyond just the food. The cups you drank from were scrutinized. Some emperors favored vessels made of specific materials believed to reveal or neutralize poisons. There's a fringe tidbit, likely more legend than fact, that certain types of glass or crystal would shatter upon contact with poison. Your water might be sourced from a private guarded aqueduct. The very air in your dining room could feel suspect. And it wasn't just poison you had to worry about. The dinner party itself was a political minefield. Who you invited, where they sat, and what you served them were all messages of power and favour. A seat closer to you meant influence. Being placed at the far end of the table was a public snub. You had to endure hours of fawning praise, thinly veiled insults and requests for money or power, all while trying to determine which of your smiling guests might have a dagger concealed in their toga. Remember the simple fear of being double-crossed for a handful of silver coins as an assassin. This is 1,000 times more complex. Here the motives are tangled webs of ambition, jealousy and generational power struggles. The man complimenting your choice of wine might be the same one who met with a conspirator just that morning. The woman gracefully laughing at your joke might be securing an alliance to place her son on your throne. You find yourself looking at a beautifully prepared dish, perhaps lark's tongues in a honey nut sauce, and you don't see food. You see risk. Every meal is a gamble. You miss the days when your biggest dietary concern was whether the rat that nibbled on your bread was diseased. In this gilded dining room surrounded by luxury and the finest foods in the world, you are starving for something you can never have a meal eaten in peace. The morning after another sleepless night, you dress in your purple-hemmed toga and prepare to face your most dangerous adversaries. They aren't barbarian hordes at the frontier or pirates on the high seas. They are the esteemed members of the Roman Senate. You walk into the Curia, the Senate House, and a hush falls over the room. Hundreds of men, the supposed heart of Roman law and tradition, rise to their feet in a show of respect. Their faces are masks of solemn reverence, but behind their eyes you see calculation, ambition, and in some cases, pure hatred. As emperor, you are the absolute authority, but the Senate is a constant nagging reminder that you are not supposed to be. They are the ghost of the old republic, a body of powerful aristocrats who believe deep down that you are merely a first citizen, a temporary steward of their state. They see you as a necessary evil at best, a tyrant at worst. Your relationship with them is a delicate, exhausting dance of power. You need their cooperation to pass laws, manage the provinces, and maintain the illusion of legitimate rule. They need you to protect them from the mob and the army. It's a partnership built on mutual suspicion. Every speech you give in the Senate is a performance. You must appear confident but not arrogant, firm but not tyrannical. You flatter them, calling them the best and wisest of men, while knowing that many of them are inept, corrupt, or both. You listen to their long-winded debates on trivial matters, nodding thoughtfully all the while, wondering which one of them is plotting to have you killed. Historians still argue about whether the Senate of the imperial era held any real power or was merely a rubber stamp for the emperor's will. The truth is, its power was subtle but deadly. It controlled prestige and legitimacy. The whispers in the Senate are more dangerous than any sword. A rumor started in the corridors of the Curia can destroy a general's reputation or turn public opinion against your latest reform. The senators are masters of insinuation and veiled threats. A senator might rise to praise the glorious and decisive actions of a rival general, a subtle way of reminding you that there are other powerful men in the empire. Another might deliver a somber speech about the virtues of the late Great Republic, a clear jab at your autocratic rule. You have to read between the lines of every word, dissecting every compliment for hidden poison. Your greatest allies in the Senate are often your most dangerous threats. You elevate a man to a position of power, making him a consul or a provincial governor, relying on his loyalty. But power is a corrupting force. The moment he feels he has enough influence and military backing, he might see you not as his patron, but as the final obstacle to his own ascent. The story of Sejanus, the ambitious Praetorian prefect under Emperor Tiberius, is a classic example. He became the emperor's most trusted confidant, accumulating immense power, only to be accused of plotting a coup and executed. Your right-hand man today could be the man signing your death warrant tomorrow. And then there is the ever-present threat of assassination. The most famous example, of course, is the murder of Julius Caesar, stabbed to death on the floor of the Senate by a conspiracy of men who called themselves his friends. That historical precedent hangs over every emperor. You look at the statues of the great orators of the past, and you can't help but feel the weight of all those daggers hidden beneath all those togas. You might have guards, but they can't protect you from a conspiracy that involves dozens of the most powerful men in Rome. You leave the Senate House feeling drained, the feigned smiles and hollow praise ringing in your ears. You remember your life as a medieval assassin, where threats were simple and direct. An angry guard, a locked door, a dog with a good sense of smell. Here the threats are dressed in fine linen and speak flawless Latin. They don't need to sneak into your bedchamber. They can kill you in broad daylight, surrounded by witnesses, and call it liberation. In the quiet of your palace, you realize that the most terrifying fortress isn't one of stone and moats, but one of whispers and lies. As if the constant threat of poison rebellion and senatorial backstabbing wasn't enough, you have another stranger burden to bear. You're not just a ruler, you are a god, or at least you are expected to become one. The imperial cult, the state-sanctioned worship of the emperor and his family, is one of the most bizarre and psychologically crushing aspects of your job. It's one thing to be respected or feared, it's another thing entirely to have priests sacrificing bulls in your honor while you're still trying to digest your breakfast. The practice began innocently enough. After his death, the Senate deified Julius Caesar, declaring him Divus Iulius, a divine being. His adopted son Augustus cleverly capitalized on this, styling himself Divi Filius, or son of a god. It was a brilliant political move that elevated his status above mere mortals. From there, the tradition snowballed. Soon, living emperors were being worshipped, particularly in the eastern provinces where the tradition of god-kings was already ancient and well established. Temples were built in your name. Festivals were held on your birthday. Your image, the imperial portrait, was treated as a sacred object. At first, it might seem flattering. Who wouldn't want to be worshipped? But the reality is a heavy, isolating weight. You are no longer allowed to be just a person. You are a symbol and embodiment of Rome itself. You can't have a bad day. You can't appear weak, uncertain, or tired. Every public appearance is a performance of serene, divine authority. When you speak, your words are not just policy. They are pronouncements. People scrutinize your every gesture, your every expression for signs of divine favor or displeasure. This pressure creates a profound and dangerous disconnect from reality. Your advisors, fearing your divine wrath, might start telling you only what you want to hear. Bad news from the frontiers gets softened. Reports of famine or plague are downplayed. You become surrounded by a chorus of yes men, living in an echo chamber of your own manufactured divinity. The Emperor Caligula is a notorious example of this taken to its extreme. Historians like Suetonius paint him as a madman who believed he was a living god, who appointed his horse as consul, and who demanded to be worshipped as Jupiter himself. While these accounts are likely exaggerated, they speak to a very real danger. When everyone treats you like a god, you might just start to believe it. And there is no room for humility. A quirky fringe tidbit of Roman imperial life was the role of the slave, who during a triumphal procession would stand behind the victorious general or emperor holding a laurel crown over his head and whispering in his ear, "Memento mori," remember you must die. This was a tradition from the Republic designed to keep a man's ego in check, but for a living god, that reminder becomes almost a threat. How can you be mortal when an entire empire is praying to your statue? The weight of this divine expectation is crushing. You are expected to be all-knowing, all-powerful, a guarantor of peace and prosperity, the Pax Romana. So when things go wrong, as they inevitably do, who is to blame? When a plague sweeps through a city, when a harvest fails, when a legion is defeated, it's not just a political failure, it's a divine one. It's a sign that you, the god, have failed, or that your divine favor is waning. The same populace that worshipped you yesterday could be cursing your name tomorrow. You look at your own reflection in a polished silver mirror and see not a man, but an icon. You remember the simple, dirty life of a medieval assassin, a life lived in the shadows, unburdened by the expectations of millions. You were a nobody, and there was a strange freedom in that. Now, you are somebody to everyone. You are a god on earth, and it is the loneliest, most terrifying job in the world. You have all the power in the universe, but you've lost the one thing that truly matters, your own humanity. You've learned not to trust your guards, your cooks, or your senators. But surely you can trust your family, right? Your loving wife, your devoted children, your loyal siblings. They are your blood, your legacy. Unfortunately, in the viper's nest of the Roman imperial court, your family is often just your most intimate and ruthless set of executioners. The closer they are to you, the more dangerous they become. Your wife, the Empress, is not just your partner. She is a political player in her own right, with her own ambitions, her own network of allies, and often her own designs on the throne. She might be fiercely protective of you, or she might be fiercely protective of her own son's future, even if that means expediting your departure from this world. The historian Tacitus famously portrays Livia, the wife of Augustus, as a master manipulator who systematically cleared the path for her own son Tiberius to inherit the throne, possibly by poisoning Augustus's potential heirs one by one. Whether this is historical fact or slanderous propaganda is a debate that still rages, but the perception of the ambitious poisoning empress was a powerful one. You look at your wife across the dinner table, and you have to wonder if her affection is genuine or a carefully crafted performance. And then there are your children. In a normal family, a son is a source of pride. In your family, a son is a rival in waiting. As your heir grows older, he starts to attract his own followers. Ambitious generals and senators might begin to rally around him, seeing him as the future and you as the past. A popular, capable son is a direct threat to your authority. The Emperor Constantine the Great, a devout Christian, had his own eldest son Crispus executed under mysterious circumstances. The official reason was a scandalous accusation involving Crispus and his stepmother, but many historians believe the real reason was that Crispus was becoming too popular and powerful, a potential threat to Constantine's absolute rule. Your other relatives are no better. brothers, sisters, cousins, nieces, nephews. Anyone with a drop of your imperial blood in their veins has a potential claim to the throne, however tenuous. They are all pieces on the political chessboard to be married off for alliances, watched for signs of treachery, or if necessary, quietly removed. The Julio-Claudian dynasty, the first imperial family, was a tangled, bloody mess of familial plots. Emperor Claudius was said to have been poisoned by his own wife Agrippina the Younger, so that her son Nero could become emperor. Nero, in turn, later had Agrippina, his own mother, murdered. He also had his stepbrother Britannicus poisoned at a dinner party. It was a family reunion where the main activity was homicide. You can't even trust the concept of legacy. You might spend your entire reign grooming a successor, only to have them predecease you, forcing you to start all over again. Or worse, you die, and your carefully laid plans collapse into a bloody civil war between your relatives. The history of Rome is littered with these dynastic struggles. The pressure to produce an heir was immense, but the very existence of that heir created an immediate and constant source of danger. You find yourself in a bizarre and tragic position. The people you should be closest to are the ones you must keep at the greatest distance. You might genuinely love your son, but you can't show him too much favour for fear of making him a target, or emboldening his ambition. You might confide in your wife, but you can never be sure her advice is for your benefit or for her own. Remember your solitary life as an assassin, where your only companion was your own shadow. In many ways, it was a safer existence. At least then you knew who your enemies were. As emperor, you are surrounded by a family that smiles and plots a family that would gladly trade your life for a chance to wear the purple robe you now find so suffocatingly heavy. You've survived another day. You've navigated the treacherous waters of the Senate, sidestepped another potential poisoning at dinner, and kept a wary eye on your ambitious family members. You are weary. The immense pressure of ruling, the constant paranoia, the crushing weight of divinity, it's all taking its toll. A thought foolish and fleeting enters your mind. What if you just stopped? What if you retired? You could find a quiet villa by the sea, spend your days reading philosophy, and leave this whole bloody mess behind. It's a lovely dream, and it will never ever happen, because for a Roman emperor there is no retirement plan. The purple robe is not a uniform you can hang up at the end of your shift. It is a shroud you wear until the day you die, and the only escape from being emperor is almost always death itself. The logic is simple and brutal. You cannot simply resign from being the most powerful man in the world. Who would you submit your resignation to? The Senate, which you've spent your reign dominating, the army, which swore an oath of loyalty directly to you, the people who worship you as a living god. The very act of stepping down would create a catastrophic power vacuum. Civil war would erupt almost instantly as ambitious generals and governors vied to fill the void. Your peaceful retirement would be the catalyst for the empire's bloody collapse. More importantly, a retired emperor is the single greatest threat to the new emperor. You would be a living, breathing symbol of an alternative regime. Every person disgruntled with the new ruler, and there would be many would flock to your banner. Your quiet villa by the sea would become a hotbed of conspiracy. You wouldn't even have to do anything. Your mere existence would be an act of rebellion. The new emperor, for his own survival, could not allow you to live. Your retirement party would be your funeral. There is one famous and exceptionally rare exception to this rule, the Emperor Diocletian. In 305 CE, after a long and transformative reign, Diocletian did something utterly unprecedented. He voluntarily abdicated the throne and retired to a massive fortified palace on the Dalmatian coast to, of all things, grow cabbages. This is a mainstream historical fact that still boggles the mind. When his former co-emperor Maximian later tried to coax him out of retirement to help solve a political crisis, Diocletian famously replied that if Maximian could see the magnificent cabbages he had grown with his own hands, he would never suggest he give up such happiness for the storms of power. But Diocletian's case was unique. He had spent 2 decades completely restructuring the empire, creating a system of 4 co-rulers known as the Tetrarchy, specifically designed to manage succession and prevent civil war. His retirement was part of a grand, systematic plan, and even then his system collapsed into civil war almost as soon as he was gone. His peaceful retirement was the exception that proved the rule. For For nearly every other emperor, the only way out was to be carried out. So, you are trapped. You are chained to the throne by the very power it gives you. You might dream of a simple life, but that option was stripped from you the moment you accepted the purple. You look at the old, weathered faces of farmers and sailors, and you feel a pang of envy. They have something you will never have: the freedom to grow old, the luxury of obscurity. You remember your past life as a medieval assassin, a creature of the shadows. Your entire goal was to be forgotten. Now your curse is that you will always be remembered. Your face is carved in stone, your deeds recorded by historians. You are a permanent fixture in the world, and there is no escape. The only peace you will find is the peace of the grave, and as you sit alone in your opulent, silent palace, you realize with a cold certainty that your biggest fear is no longer being assassinated. It's surviving another year. The endless, exhausting, paranoid burden of being emperor is a fate worse than a quick, clean death. You are the master of the world, and all you want is for it to end. The weight of your imperial paranoia has taken its toll, and you've fallen ill. A fever racks your body, and a cough rattles your chest. You long for the simple, if ineffective, herbal remedies of your past life as an assassin. At least then, the treatments were unlikely to actively harm you. But you are no longer a shadowy figure who can sweat out a fever in a hayloft. You are back in the medieval world, and you've just summoned the doctor. This is quite possibly the worst decision you have ever made. You thought being hunted by guards or plotted against by senators was bad. Welcome to the world of medieval medicine, a terrifying landscape of profound ignorance, misplaced confidence and treatments that were often far worse than the disease. The man who enters your chamber is not a scientist. He is a theorist, a philosopher, whose understanding of the human body is based on ancient Greek texts that are over 1,000 years old and almost entirely wrong. His entire medical philosophy revolves around the theory of the four humours, a concept developed by Hippocrates and later expanded by Galen. The idea is that the body contains four essential fluids, or humours: black bile, yellow bile, phlegm and blood. A healthy person has these four humours in perfect balance. Sickness, therefore, is simply an imbalance: your fever and cough. Clearly you have an excess of blood, which is a hot and moist humour. The solution is obvious, logical and horrifyingly simple. You need to get rid of some of it. Welcome to the wonderful world of bloodletting. The doctor, with an air of immense authority, produces his tools. This might be a sharp knife called a lancet for slicing open a vein in your arm, or for a more localized treatment, a set of cups for cupping. Even more unsettling, he might open a small grimy box filled with leeches. He'll apply these wriggling creatures to your skin and let them drink their fill of your excess blood. He assures you this will cool your fever and restore your vital balance. What it will actually do is weaken you, dehydrate you, and potentially introduce a whole new set of infections into your bloodstream from his unsterilized instruments. But the treatments don't stop there. He might prescribe a diet to counteract your hot illness. You'll be fed cold foods like cucumbers and melons regardless of their nutritional value. He will examine the colour, smell and even taste of your urine, comparing it to a detailed urine wheel chart to diagnose your ailment. Historians still marvel at the complexity of these charts, which linked different shades of yellow and brown to every conceivable malady from lovesickness to demonic possession. If the bloodletting and diet don't work, things get more creative. The doctor might recommend trepanning, drilling a hole in your skull to release the evil spirits or pressures causing your headache. For a sore throat, you might be told to wear a poultice of goose dung and honey. A quirky fringe tidbit is the use of mummy powder, a popular medieval remedy made from the ground-up remains of Egyptian mummies, which was believed to have powerful healing properties. You could be prescribed a spoonful of a 2,000-year-old pharaoh to cure your cough. There is no concept of germs. The doctor doesn't wash his hands between visiting you and the man dying of dysentery down the hall. Surgery is a brutal, agonizing affair performed without anesthesia, usually by a barber surgeon who spends most of his day cutting hair. Amputations are a last resort, with a horrifyingly low survival rate due to shock and infection. As the doctor packs up his leeches and lancets, leaving you weaker and sicker than before, you feel a new kind of despair. As an emperor, you feared the hands of men. As an assassin, you feared the hand of justice. But here in this sickbed, you fear the hand of the healer. You are at the mercy of a man who is trying to cure you with absolute conviction and a complete lack of understanding. You lie back, your arm throbbing from the lancet's cut, and you pray. Not for the medicine to work, but for the chance to survive the cure. Your fever has broken. You've somehow survived the doctor's well-intentioned butchery, and you're back on your feet. You stumble out of your hovel and into the muddy street, only to find a crowd gathering in the town square. A man stands accused of stealing a loaf of bread from the local baker. You expect a trial, perhaps some witnesses, a magistrate weighing the evidence. Instead, you are about to witness one of the most bizarre and terrifying aspects of the medieval mindset: justice by ordeal. In this world, guilt and innocence are not determined by evidence but by divine intervention. The legal system operates on the deeply held belief that God will not allow an innocent person to suffer. Therefore, the best way to determine the truth is to subject the accused to a dangerous, painful test. If they survive unharmed, it is a sign from God that they are innocent. If they are injured or die well, God has passed his judgment. Welcome to a court where the judge is invisible and the verdict is delivered via third-degree burns. You watch as the accused man, pale with terror, is brought before the local priest and the town reeve. He swears his innocence on a holy relic, but the baker is adamant. Since there are no witnesses, the matter will be settled by the ordeal of hot iron. A blacksmith pulls a heavy iron bar from a roaring fire, its surface glowing a menacing cherry red. The priest blesses the iron, intoning prayers and warning the accused that God is watching. The man is then forced to carry the glowing bar for a set distance, usually 9 feet. His hands sizzle upon contact. The smell of burnt flesh fills the air. He cries out in agony but stumbles forward, completing the required steps before dropping the iron. His ordeal is not over. His burned hand is immediately bound in cloth and sealed with wax. He is then to wait for 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, the priest will unwrap the wound. If it is healing cleanly without infection, it is a miracle, a sign of his innocence. If it is festering and infected, which it almost certainly will be in this era of non-existent hygiene, it is a sign of his guilt. He will be punished accordingly, usually by hanging or mutilation. This was a mainstream and legally sanctioned practice for centuries. It wasn't just for theft. Accusations of murder, treason or heresy could all be settled this way. And there were several variations, each more terrifying than the last. In the ordeal of hot water, the accused had to plunge their arm into a cauldron of boiling water to retrieve a stone. In the ordeal of cold water, they were bound and thrown into a river or pond. If they sank, they were considered innocent and promptly pulled out, hopefully. If they floated, it was a sign that the pure water of baptism was rejecting their sinful body, and they were therefore guilty. It was a no-win situation. Historians still argue about the true purpose of these trials. Were they a genuine, if misguided, attempt to find truth, or were they a sophisticated form of psychological control, a way for the authorities to force confessions and maintain order through terror? A priest or official could subtly manipulate the conditions, the temperature of the iron, the depth of the water, to nudge the outcome in a desired direction. A quirky fringe tidbit is the ordeal of the morsel, or corsned, which was usually reserved for clergy. The accused priest would have to swallow a piece of consecrated bread or cheese. If he choked on it, he was guilty. It was believed that a guilty man would find it impossible to swallow the sacred food. You watch the poor man with the burned hand being led away his fate, now sealed not by his actions, but by the behavior of bacteria, over the next 72 hours. You think back to the complex, corrupt, but at least logical legal system of Rome. You think of the cold, clean efficiency of an assassin's blade. This is something else entirely. This is a system of justice based on faith, fear, and sheer dumb luck. It's a world where innocence can't protect you, and the only evidence that matters is a sign from a silent heaven. The sight of that gruesome trial by ordeal is more than enough for you. This town, with its fanatical priest and questionable justice system, is no longer a safe place to linger. It's time to move on. You gather your few belongings, a half-eaten loaf of bread, your trusty dagger, and a water skin filled with cloudy, slightly metallic-tasting water, and set out on the road. You're about to discover that in the medieval world, the journey itself is often as dangerous as the destination. Forget paved Roman roads and organised way stations. You are now trudging through a landscape where the concept of infrastructure has been decaying for centuries. The road is little more than a muddy, rutted track, a treacherous ribbon of earth winding through dense forests and desolate moors. After a heavy rain, the path becomes a quagmire, a boot-sucking morass that can swallow a cart axle whole. Progress is slow, measured in aching feet, and curses muttered under your breath. Your first and most constant companion is fear. The forests are dark and foreboding, rumoured to be the home of wolves, bears, and things far less natural. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the undergrowth sends a jolt of adrenaline through you. But the real threat isn't mythical beasts, it's other people. The woods are crawling with bandits, desperate men who will gladly slit your throat for the spare coins you don't have, and the boots on your feet. These aren't charming rogues like Robin Hood. They are brutal, starving outlaws who see you as nothing more than a resource. Travelling alone is a death wish. Even in a group you are vulnerable. You learn to walk with a hand resting on the hilt of your dagger, your eyes constantly scanning the trees. You don't trust anyone you meet on the road. That friendly pilgrim asking for directions. He might have two friends hiding in the bushes just ahead. That travelling merchant with a broken-down cart. It could be a trap. A quirky fringe tidbit of medieval travel is the Peace of God and Truce of God movements, decrees issued by the Church that attempted to limit violence by forbidding attacks on certain classes of people like clergy and peasants on certain days of the week. The fact that such decrees were necessary tells you everything you need to know about the lawlessness of the era. As dusk begins to fall, a new anxiety sets in finding shelter. There are no cosy roadside inns every few miles. You might walk for an entire day without seeing a single sign of civilization. Your best hope is to reach a monastery. Monks had a religious duty to offer hospitality to travellers, providing a simple meal and a safe place to sleep on a straw-strewn floor. These monasteries were beacons of safety and light in a dark and dangerous world. If you aren't lucky enough to find a monastery, you might find a squalid tavern in a tiny village. The inn is likely a single smoky room filled with drunken, surly locals who stare at you with open suspicion. The food is a mystery stew, the ale is watered down, and you'll share a single lice-infested bed with three complete strangers. You sleep with your coin pouch tied tightly around your neck, and one eye open listening to the snores and muttered nightmares of the men pressed up against you. If you find no shelter at all, you are forced to sleep in the open. You crawl into a ditch or huddle at the base of a tree, wrapping your thin cloak tightly around you, praying it doesn't rain and that no one stumbles upon you in the dark. The nights are cold, the ground is hard, and the sounds of the wilderness are a constant unnerving chorus. Historians still debate the average distance a person could travel in a day, but estimates range from a meagre 15 to 25 miles on foot, depending on the terrain and weather. Every mile is earned through exhaustion and vigilance. You think back to the vast, efficient network of Roman roads where legions could march and messages could travel with relative speed and safety. This is the opposite. This is a world that has shrunk where the next town over feels like a foreign country, and the simple act of getting there is a trial in itself. After days of perilous travel, you see it in the distance, the silhouette of a town wall against the grey sky. A sense of relief washes over you. Civilization safety, a hot meal that isn't just your own stale bread. You quicken your pace, your tired legs, finding a new surge of energy. But as you get closer, the first thing that hits you isn't the sight of the bustling marketplace, but the smell. Oh, the smell. You have arrived in a medieval city, and you're about to take a full sensory dive into a world of unimaginable filth. The romantic image of charming cobblestoned streets and quaint timber-framed houses immediately evaporates. The reality is a chaotic, suffocating stench. There is no sanitation system. There are no sewers. The narrow, unpaved streets are open drains flowing with a foul cocktail of human and animal waste, discarded food scraps and runoff from noisy, polluting industries. Butchers toss animal entrails into the gutter. Tanners scrape hides using vats of urine and lime, the acrid smell mingling with the smoke from countless wood fires. You learn to walk in the middle of the street, not out of politeness, but to avoid the contents of chamber pots being unceremoniously dumped from the windows above. The cry of Gardyloo, a corruption of the French Gardes Low, "Watch out for the water" was a common courtesy, but not one you could always count on. You pick your way through the muck, dodging stray pigs, chickens and dogs that roam freely, feasting on the abundant garbage. The air is thick and heavy, a palpable miasma you can almost taste. In the summer, the heat intensifies the stench to an unbearable degree. In the winter, the filth freezes into treacherous, slippery slicks. Disease is everywhere, with drinking water often drawn from wells contaminated by runoff. Outbreaks of dysentery, cholera and typhoid are common and deadly. A mainstream historical fact is that the average life expectancy was brutally short, often not much beyond 30 or 35 years, largely due to disease and poor sanitation. The city is also incredibly loud. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the shouts of merchants hawking their wares, the squeal of ungreased cartwheels, the tolling of church bells. It's a constant, overwhelming cacophony from dawn until dusk. There is no concept of personal space. The streets are a jostling, shoving mass of people. You are pressed against sweaty bodies, breathing in your neighbour's bad breath, trying not to get your purse cut by the nimble-fingered thief in the crowd. The houses are crammed together, leaning against each other for support, their upper stories jutting out over the street, blocking out the sun and trapping the foul air below. Most homes are dark, smoky and crowded with entire families, often living and sleeping in a single room alongside their animals. The floors are covered in straw or rushes which were rarely changed and became a breeding ground for fleas, lice and other vermin. A quirky fringe tidbit is that people would sometimes carry fragrant pomanders, small balls of aromatic spices and herbs, to hold to their noses, a desperate attempt to create a small breathable bubble of pleasant air amidst the urban stench. Historians still argue about whether people of the era were simply used to these conditions, or if they were as repulsed as we would be. Contemporary writings are full of complaints about the filth and smells, suggesting that while it was a part of life, it was certainly not a pleasant one. You finally find a tavern, collapsing onto a bench, and order an ale. You drink it down, trying not to think too hard about the water it was brewed with. You look around at the grimy, smoke-stained walls and the press of humanity around you. The city isn't a beacon of progress. It's a petri dish, a noisy, smelly, disease-ridden, but undeniably vibrant trap. You thought the wilderness was dangerous, but at least out there the air was clean. Here you are, surrounded by people, but you've never felt more keenly how fragile life can be. From your spot in the filthy tavern, you look up at the hill overlooking the city and see it a castle. Its stone towers and high curtain walls dominate the skyline, a symbol of power, permanence and security. It's the image from every fairy tale, the home of kings and queens, a place of grand feasts and noble knights. A part of you, weary from the road and the squalor of the city, yearns for the imagined comfort and safety within those walls. But you should know better by now. You are about to discover why living in a medieval castle wasn't a fairy tale. It was a cold, drafty and deeply uncomfortable existence. You managed to get inside, perhaps as a hired hand, or by delivering goods. The first thing you notice is not the grandeur, but the oppressive chill. Castles were fortresses first and homes a very distant second. Their primary purpose was defence, not comfort. The massive stone walls, several feet thick, were brilliant at stopping a battering ram, but they were also giant sponges for the cold and damp. They absorbed the winter chill and radiated it into every room, making the interior feel like a meat locker. Heat came from enormous open fireplaces built into the walls of the Great Hall and a few private chambers. While they looked impressive, they were spectacularly inefficient. Most of the heat went straight up the chimney, along with a great deal of smoke that often billowed back into the room, making your eyes water and covering every surface with a fine layer of soot. You'd huddle close to the fire, roasting on one side, while your back remained frozen. At night, you'd sleep with heavy woolen blankets and fur throws, not for luxury, but for sheer survival. And it was dark. The windows, known as arrow slits or loops, were narrow, vertical slits in the stone designed for archers to shoot through, not for letting in light or providing a scenic view. They made the interior perpetually gloomy even on a sunny day. The main sources of light after dark were candles made from smelly tallow animal fat or expensive beeswax, and torches that filled the air with yet more smoke and the constant risk of setting the tapestries on fire. Speaking of tapestries, those weren't just for decoration. They were a practical necessity hung on the cold stone walls to provide a crucial layer of insulation and to stop some of the relentless drafts that whistled through the halls. A quirky fringe tidbit is that the lord and his family often had a privy or toilet, built into the thickness of the outer wall. It was little more than a stone seat over a hole that opened straight down to the moat or a cesspit below. It was private, yes, but also incredibly cold and draughty, especially on a windy day. For everyone else, it was back to chamber pots or a communal latrine in the courtyard. The castle was also a noisy, bustling and not particularly private place. The Great Hall was the centre of life, a multi-purpose space where the lord held court, ate his meals, and where much of the household staff would sleep on the floor at night on straw pallets. The sounds of clattering armour, barking dogs, shouting servants, and the ever-present smoke and smells of cooking and unwashed bodies were your constant companions. A mainstream historical fact is that the iconic image of the solitary princess in her high tower is largely a myth. A castle was a crowded, functional military installation home to the lord's family, his knights men-at-arms and a vast retinue of servants from cooks and stable hands to blacksmiths and chaplains. Privacy was a luxury few could afford. Historians still debate the degree to which nobles and commoners intermingled within the castle walls, but it was far from the strict upstairs-downstairs separation of later centuries. Life was communal, loud, and lacked almost all of the modern comforts we associate with a home. As you shiver in a dark, draughty corridor, you realise the truth. A castle wasn't a palace. It was a beautifully designed, incredibly strong, and miserably uncomfortable machine for war. You've seen how the nobles live in their cold stone castles, and how the townsfolk exist in their crowded, filthy cities. But as you leave the castle walls and venture into the countryside, you are about to encounter the vast, silent majority of the medieval population. They are not lords, knights, or assassins. They are the peasants, the serfs, the backbone of the entire feudal system. And their life is a relentless, thankless, and crushingly monotonous cycle of toil. You are now one of them. Your day begins before the sun rises, not with the sound of a bell, but with the gnawing ache of hunger in your stomach. You live in a one-room hovel made of wattle and daub, a mixture of woven sticks and mud with a thatched roof that leaks when it rains, and is home to a thriving population of mice and insects. The floor is packed earth, and the only furniture is a rough-hewn table and a few stools. You share this small space with your entire family, and in the winter your most valuable livestock, like a pig or a couple of chickens brought inside to keep them from freezing or being stolen. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, unwashed bodies and animals. Your life is dictated by the seasons and the demands of the local lord. You are a serf, which means you are not technically a slave, but you are not free either. You are legally bound to the land. You cannot leave the manor, you cannot marry, and you cannot even send your son to join the church without the lord's explicit permission. In exchange for a small plot of land to grow your own food, you owe the lord your labour. Several days a week you must work his fields, the domain, ploughing, planting, and harvesting his crops before you can even think about your own. The work is back-breaking. You guide a heavy wooden plough pulled by a team of oxen, your muscles straining with every step. You sow seeds by hand, broadcasting them across the fields. At harvest time, you spend weeks under the hot sun cutting wheat with a simple sickle, your back screaming in protest. A mainstream historical fact is the sheer inefficiency of medieval agriculture. The three-field system was an improvement, but yields were still pitifully low. For every seed you planted, you might only get 3 or 4 back. A single bad harvest caused by drought, flood, or pestilence could mean starvation for your entire village. Your diet is a monotonous rotation of pottage, a thick stew of peas beans, and whatever vegetables you can grow, and coarse dark bread made from rye or barley. Meat is a rare luxury reserved for feast days. You might poach a rabbit or a fish from the lord's forest or stream, but if you're caught, the punishment is severe, ranging from a hefty fine to mutilation. There is no escape from the cycle. Your days are long, your rewards are few, and your future is identical to your present. The church offers the only real solace, a promise of a better life in the next world, to make this one bearable. The local priest is your connection to God, but he is also another mouth to feed, as you owe the church a tithe, a tenth of your harvest. A quirky fringe tidbit is the celebration of holidays like Plough Monday or Hocktide, rare moments of communal fun and games that provided a brief chaotic respite from the daily grind. These were days of feasting, drinking, and folk rituals that briefly turned the rigid social order on its head, but they were fleeting. The next morning, it was back to the fields. Historians still argue about the level of peasant agency and resistance. While open rebellion was rare and usually brutally suppressed, peasants found subtle ways to resist, like working slowly on the lord's land, hiding grain from the tax collector, or appealing to manor courts over disputes. But these were small victories in a life defined by powerlessness. As the sun sets, you stumble back to your hovel, your body aching, your hands calloused and raw. You eat your meagre meal and fall into an exhausted sleep, only to wake up and do it all again. You are not making history. You are not a hero or a villain. You are fuel. You are one of the millions of anonymous souls whose sweat and labour support the entire, glittering, violent and cold world of the knights and kings above you. The exhausted, dreamless sleep of the peasant fades into a new kind of cold. The smell of mud and manure is gone, replaced by the sharp, clean scent of salt and pine. You're no longer a serf bound to a tiny plot of land under the watchful eye of a distant lord. The world of the serf dissolves and you awaken in a different time, a different body on the edge of a steel-grey fjord in 9th century Scandinavia. You are a Norseman. You are what the terrified monks of England will one day call a Viking. And the first thing you need to do is get rid of that horned helmet you're picturing. It doesn't exist. That iconic image of the savage warrior with horns sprouting from his head is a complete fabrication, a piece of romantic fantasy invented for 19th century operas. It's a mainstream historical fact that there is zero archaeological evidence for Vikings wearing horned helmets in battle. They were impractical, easy to grab, and would have been a tactical nightmare. If you wear anything on your head, it's a simple cap of hardened leather, or if you're a wealthy and successful raider, a conical iron helmet with a nose guard known as a Spangenhelm. It's functional ugly, and designed to stop a sword from cleaving your skull in two, not to look impressive. Your life is not one of constant bloodthirsty adventure. You are for most of the year a farmer. You tend to hardy crops of barley and oats in a short, unforgiving growing season. You are a fisherman casting nets into the frigid waters of the fjord. You are a carpenter, a blacksmith, a hunter. Your home is a longhouse, a large, smoky, timber-framed building you share with your extended family and your animals. Life is hard, governed by the rhythm of the seasons and the constant struggle to produce enough food to survive the long, dark and brutally cold winter. So why do you go raiding? Why risk your life crossing the treacherous sea to attack foreign shores? It's not because you are inherently more violent or savage than anyone else in this brutal age. It's a matter of economics and opportunity. Your homeland is rugged and poor. Good farmland is scarce. The path to wealth and status doesn't lie in the soil, it lies across the sea. A successful raid can bring back silver jewellery, fine fabrics, weapons, and most valuable of all thrall slaves, to work your farm and increase your wealth. This isn't just a quest for glory, it's a high-risk, high-reward business venture. The silver you bring back allows you to buy better land, attract a wife, and secure your family's future. You are not a mindless brute. A quirky and surprising tidbit is that Vikings were often obsessed with personal grooming. Archaeologists have found an abundance of combs, tweezers, and even ear spoons in Viking graves. You take pride in your appearance, keeping your hair and beard clean and well combed. In fact, contemporary English accounts complain that the Viking invaders were far too clean-bathed weekly and were constantly seducing local women with their well-groomed charm. But when the time for raiding comes, a different side of your culture emerges. You are part of a society that values courage, strength, and a fierce reputation. Among your warband, there might be a few terrifying figures who stand apart, the berserkers. These warriors are said to enter a trance-like fury in battle, the berserker gang biting their shields, howling like animals and fighting with a terrifying, seemingly unstoppable rage. Historians still argue whether this was a real psychological state, a ritualistic trance induced by hallucinogenic mushrooms, or simply a form of calculated psychological warfare to terrify opponents. Whatever the cause, when the berserkers begin their howling chant, even you, their ally, feel a shiver of fear. They are your ultimate weapon, a force of pure chaos to be unleashed upon your enemies. As the days grow longer and the sea ice recedes, the talk in the Longhouse turns to the west, to the rich, poorly defended monasteries of England, or the fractured kingdoms of Francia. The Longship, your masterpiece of naval engineering, is being prepared. Its shallow draft will allow it to navigate rivers deep into enemy territory, and its sleek design makes it fast and agile. The decision is made. You will go. You sharpen your axe, check your shield, and say goodbye to your family. You are a farmer, about to become a pirate, a husband, about to become a killer. The sea calls, and the promise of silver outweighs the fear of death. For now, the goodbyes are said, your axe is sharp, your shield is repaired, and you join the others dragging the Longship from its winter shelter and down to the water's edge. The ship is a thing of beauty, a marvel of clinker-built construction, its overlapping oak planks riveted together to create a hull that is both incredibly strong and surprisingly flexible. It feels alive as it settles into the frigid water of the fjord. But as you climb aboard with 40 or 50 other men, the reality of your journey begins to set in. You are about to cross the unforgiving North Sea in what is essentially a very large, very elegant open canoe. This is no luxury cruise. This is a voyage into misery. The ship is shockingly cramped. You find your spot on a wooden sea chest, which holds your meagre personal belongings and doubles as your rowing bench. There is no cabin, no shelter from the elements. You are completely exposed to the wind, the rain, and the relentless soul-drenching sea spray. You huddle together for warmth, your woolen cloak greased with lanolin to make it water-resistant, becoming your only shield against the biting cold. The journey is a mix of agonizingly hard work and mind-numbing boredom. When the wind is in your favor, you raise the single large square sail, and the ship slices through the waves with exhilarating speed. But when the wind dies or blows against you, it's time to row. You and your shipmates bend your backs to the oars, pulling in a rhythmic, monotonous unison that goes on for hours, your muscles burning, your hands blistering and raw. The only sounds are the creak of the oars in their locks, the grunts of exertion, and the endless hiss of the waves. Food is a simple, grim affair. You live on dried fish, hard, unleavened bread that could break a tooth, and perhaps some soured milk or cheese. Fresh water is stored in wooden casks and is strictly rationed. It soon takes on a stale, woody taste. There is no fire for cooking. A stray spark could be catastrophic. Every meal is cold, salty, and eaten with wet, numb fingers. And then there's the sea itself. The North Sea is notoriously unpredictable. One moment the water can be as smooth as glass. The next, a storm can blow in with terrifying speed, turning the world into a churning chaos of grey waves and shrieking wind. Your Longship, for all its brilliant design, rides low in the water. Massive waves crash over the sides, threatening to swamp the vessel. Every man who isn't rowing is bailing, using wooden buckets to frantically throw the icy water back into the sea. You're soaked to the bone, shivering uncontrollably, your body aching with cold and exhaustion. You are not a fearsome warrior now. You are a small, insignificant creature at the mercy of a vast and indifferent ocean. Seasickness is rampant, and the side of the ship becomes a place of wretched, heaving misery. A quirky fringe tidbit is how Vikings likely navigated. While they used the sun and stars when visible legends speak of a sunstone, a piece of calcite, or another crystal that could polarize light, allowing them to locate the sun's position even on a cloudy, overcast day. Historians still debate the practical effectiveness and widespread use of such a tool, but for you lost in a grey, featureless expanse of water, any hope of finding your way is a godsend. Sleep is a luxury you can barely afford. It comes in short, fitful bursts huddled on your chest, your head resting on a coil of rope. You are never truly dry, never truly warm. You dream of your longhouse, of the warmth of the fire, and the solid feel of the earth beneath your feet. You look at the faces of your shipmates, grim and bearded, and you see the same exhaustion and doubt in their eyes. Is the promise of silver really worth this, Will you even survive to see the shores of England? The journey stretches on for days, maybe a week. You lose track of time. Your world shrinks to the confines of this single 60-foot plank of wood. It's a world of cold, damp hunger and fear. And as you finally spot a faint dark line on the horizon land, the feeling isn't just relief. It's a hardening of your heart. You have endured this hell, and now someone is going to pay for it. The English coast rises from the grey sea, a lush green and fatally unprepared land. Your exhaustion from the voyage is replaced by a tense, focused energy. The ship glides silently up a river, mouth its shallow draft, allowing you to bypass coastal defences and penetrate deep into the countryside. You and your shipmates are no longer miserable seasick farmers. You are a hunting party, and your prey is a nearby monastery, a place known to be rich in gold-silver, and most importantly, completely undefended. You beach the longship on a secluded bank. There are no grand battle speeches, no stirring calls to glory. There is just a quiet, grim understanding of the work to be done. You grab your round shield, your spear, and the heavy axe that feels like an extension of your own arm. The raid begins not with a thunderous charge, but with a swift, silent jog across the fields towards the stone walls of the holy place. The scene that unfolds is not the heroic choreographed clash of swords you see in movies. It is brutal, messy, and deeply personal. You are not fighting a faceless army. You are attacking a community of terrified, unarmed monks whose only weapon is prayer. You kick down the wooden door of the chapel and the screaming starts. The air fills with the sounds of splintering wood shattering relics and the pathetic, desperate cries of men who have never known violence. Your job is not to conquer, it is to steal. You move through the buildings with a practiced, ruthless efficiency. You rip a golden cross from the altar stuff, silver chalices into a sack, and tear the jeweled cover from a sacred manuscript. A mainstream historical fact is that early Viking raids specifically targeted monasteries because they were repositories of immense portable wealth and were staffed by non-combatants, making them the perfect soft targets. But this is not a victimless crime. The monks who resist, who try to protect their holy treasures, are cut down without a second thought. You are not driven by some anti-Christian fury. This is pure, pragmatic violence. A dead monk cannot raise an alarm. A terrified monk will tell you where the rest of the treasure is hidden. You see a young novice, his face pale with shock, trying to flee. You don't see a boy, you see a potential witness. Your axe swings and the problem is solved. The violence is quick, intimate, and sickeningly easy. You round up the survivors. Some will be held for ransom. The younger, healthier ones will be bound and dragged back to the ship to be sold as thralls. They are no longer people. They are livestock, another form of portable wealth. You look into their eyes and see a terror so profound it barely seems human. You feel nothing, or you force yourself to feel nothing. Empathy is a liability in this line of work. As you ransack the storerooms, you find food, wine, and fine cloth. And fine. The tension breaks, and a kind of wild, manic energy takes over. Men are shouting, laughing, drinking the monastery's wine straight from the cask. It's a chaotic, feverish release after the tension of the voyage and the brutality of the attack. A quirky fringe tidbit is the Viking concept of strandhugg, which literally means beach chop, or strand hewing. This was the term for a lightning-fast coastal raid, the classic hit-and-run tactic of grabbing what you could and disappearing before any organised defence could be mounted. This is exactly what you are doing, but you can't linger. The alarm has likely been raised. The local thegn or ealdorman will be mustering his fire at the local militia right now. You gather your loot and your captives and retreat to the longship as quickly as you came. As you push off from the shore, you look back at the smoking ruins of the monastery, a place of peace and prayer that you have just turned into a slaughterhouse. The silver in your sack feels heavy, but so does the silence on the ship as you row back out to sea. Historians still argue about the psychological toll such raids took on the Vikings themselves. Were they desensitized to the violence, or did it haunt them? You don't have time for such reflection. You only know that you are richer than you were yesterday, and that your hands and your soul are covered in blood. Years of raiding have made you wealthy. Your sea chest is heavy with English silver and Frankish coins. You have thralls to work your land, and a reputation that commands respect in the Longhouse. But the life of a raider is a young man's game. The sea journeys are getting harder, the risks greater. You look around at your rugged, overpopulated homeland and decide to make the ultimate gamble. You are not going to raid for wealth anymore. You are going to use your wealth to find a new home. You are going to settle Iceland. The journey is even more perilous than the short hop to England. It's a vast, open ocean voyage into the unknown, guided only by the sun, the stars, and perhaps the flight of ravens released from the ship. When you finally spot the coast of Iceland, it is both magnificent and terrifying. It is a land of fire and ice, a volcanic wasteland of black sand deserts, jagged lava fields and colossal glaciers. It is stark empty and utterly unforgiving. There are no forests to speak of, only stunted birch and willow. There are no easy harbours, no rich monasteries to plunder. There is just land, empty land. You and your family, along with your livestock and a handful of loyal followers, find a suitable spot along the coast and perform the landnam, the land-taking ritual. A mainstream historical fact is that the first Norse settlers beginning in the late 9th century claimed vast tracts of land often marked by carrying fire around their perimeter. You build a longhouse, a replica of the one you left behind, but this one feels different. It feels isolated, a tiny pocket of human warmth in a vast, indifferent wilderness. The first few years are a brutal struggle for survival. The Icelandic summer is fleeting, the growing season impossibly short. Your barley crops struggle in the thin volcanic soil. You learn that this new land is not meant for large-scale agriculture. Your survival depends on your animals, your sheep, cattle and goats. You become a pastoralist, moving your herds to high summer pastures. Fishing and hunting for seals and seabirds become essential sources of food. The winters are the true test. They are incredibly long, dark and severe. For months you are snowed in your world, shrinking to the smoky, lamplit interior of the longhouse. The wind howls outside like a hungry wolf. The cold is a physical presence seeping through the turf walls. You huddle around the central fire, telling stories, mending tools, and trying to stave off the creeping despair that Icelanders would call skamdegistunglindi, the short-day depression. Your precious livestock, sheltered at one end of the longhouse, must be carefully rationed their hay. If the hay runs out before the spring thaw, your animals starve. And if your animals starve, you starve. A quirky fringe tidbit of early Icelandic life is the complete lack of native land mammals save for the Arctic fox. This meant there were no large predators to worry about, but also no game like deer or boar to hunt. The settlers introduced all the domestic animals, which then had to adapt to this strange new environment. You are not alone in this struggle. A scattered community of other settlers is slowly taking shape across the island, but there is no king, no central authority. You are a free farmer, a chieftain of your own small domain. Disputes are not settled by a lord's decree, but by a complex system of law and negotiation at local and regional assemblies, the most famous of which is the Althing, a kind of open-air parliament where free men gathered each summer to make laws and settle feuds. Historians still argue about the exact nature of this early Icelandic commonwealth. Was it a primitive democracy, a unique form of republicanism, or simply an oligarchy of powerful chieftains? For you, it means that your reputation, your wealth and your ability to command loyal followers are the only things that keep you safe. You have escaped the kings of Norway, but you have traded them for a harsher master, the land itself. You look out at the vast, empty landscape, at the distant glaciers gleaming under a cold sun, and you realize the truth. The greatest battles you will ever fight will not be against English soldiers, but against the endless winter and the crushing solitude of this beautiful, brutal island. You've survived the brutal Icelandic winters and established your farmstead. You are a free man, a chieftain, a master of your own destiny in this new kingless land. But without a king to enforce order, a new and more personal danger emerges, one that governs every social interaction from a shared meal to a horse trade. You must now navigate the treacherous world of Viking law honour and the ever-present threat of the blood feud. Life in the Icelandic Commonwealth is governed by a complex and intricate legal code, which is not written down at first but memorised and recited by a law speaker at the annual Althing assembly. This is a society obsessed with law, but it has no police force to enforce it. Justice is a private matter. If someone wrongs you, steals your sheep, insults your wife, or injures your kinsman, it is up to you to seek redress. Your first recourse is the law. You can bring a case against the offender at the local assembly. You will need witnesses, and you will need powerful friends to support your claim. The legal proceedings are incredibly formulaic, filled with precise oaths and procedures. One wrong word, one misstep in the ritual, and your case could be thrown out. If you win your case, the court might declare the offender an outlaw. This doesn't mean he is arrested. It means he has been stripped of all legal protection. He can be killed by anyone without penalty. His property is forfeit. He is a wolf in holy places, a man to be hunted. But often the law is not enough. Your most valuable possession in this society is not your farm or your silver, it's your honor, hider. A public insult, even a minor one, cannot be ignored. If you fail to respond to a slight, you will be seen as weak, a man unworthy of respect. Your followers will abandon you, and your rivals will see you as an easy target. This is where the blood feud begins. It might start with something small. Your neighbor's prize stallion wanders onto your land and gets into a fight with your horse. Insults are exchanged. A push becomes a shove. A shove becomes a blow with the flat of a sword. Soon a kinsman is injured, or worse, killed. Now the honor of your entire family is at stake. You are legally and socially obligated to seek vengeance. This could mean demanding a hefty compensation payment in silver the vergild or man price, or it could mean seeking revenge in kind, a life for a life. A mainstream historical fact vividly chronicled in the Icelandic sagas like Njal's saga or Egil's saga is that these feuds could spiral out of control, engulfing entire families and districts in a cycle of tit-for-tat killings that could last for generations. Your duty to avenge a slain relative was absolute. To fail to do so was the ultimate shame. So you plan your revenge. You gather your kinsmen and loyal followers and launch a surprise attack on the offender's farmstead. The feud escalates. They retaliate, burning your barn in the middle of the night. You respond by ambushing one of their cousins on the road to the Althing. The cycle of violence is relentless and exhausting. It drains your resources, depletes your manpower, and fills your life with constant gnawing anxiety. A quirky fringe tidbit is the use of insulting or nid poetry. A cleverly composed slanderous verse could be as damaging to a man's honor as a physical wound, often accusing him of cowardice or sexual deviancy. Crafting and reciting such poetry was a dangerous game that could easily get you killed. Historians still debate whether the sagas exaggerate the extent and brutality of these feuds, or if they accurately reflect a society teetering on the edge of anarchy. For you, it is the grim reality. You look at your sons, and you don't just see the future of your farm. You see the next generation of combatants in a conflict that began before they were born. You spend your nights worrying not about wolves but about a rival chieftain, and his sons creeping towards your longhouse with fire and steel. You came to Iceland to be a free man, but you have become a slave to a different kind of master, the unending, bloody demands of honor. The years pass. Your hair is now more grey than blonde. Your back aches from a lifetime of farming and fighting. The world you knew is changing, and the fierce, independent spirit of the Viking age is beginning to fade like the last embers of a longhouse fire. You are witnessing the twilight of the Northmen, a slow, inexorable decline brought about, not by a single decisive battle, but by powerful, encroaching forces of change. The first and most significant change is religion. For centuries you worshipped the old gods Odin the All-Father, a god of wisdom, war and poetry, Thor the thunderous protector of mankind with his mighty hammer Mjolnir, Freya the goddess of love and beauty. These were gods who valued courage, cunning, and a good death in battle which would earn you a seat in Valhalla. But a new god has arrived in Scandinavia, brought by missionaries from the south. He is a pale, gentle god who speaks of forgiveness, humility and peace concepts that are alien to your warrior ethos. At first you and your people resist. The Christian missionaries are mocked, threatened and sometimes killed. But the new faith has a powerful ally, kings. Ambitious Scandinavian rulers like Olaf Tryggvason of Norway see Christianity as a tool for centralization. The old faith, with its decentralized worship and powerful local chieftains, was an obstacle to royal authority. A unified Christian kingdom with a hierarchy of bishops and priests loyal to the king was a much more effective model for state building. A mainstream historical fact is that the conversion of Scandinavia was often a brutal top-down process. Kings offered a simple choice: accept baptism or face the sword. By the end of the 11th century, most of Scandinavia had officially, if reluctantly, become Christian. The old gods were driven into the shadows, becoming figures of folklore and superstition. The second force of change is political consolidation. The days of independent chieftains and freelance raiding parties are numbered. Powerful kingdoms are emerging in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. These new organized states have professional armies, fortified towns, and a centralized system of taxation. They have little tolerance for the chaotic freelance violence of the Viking Age. Raiding is no longer a legitimate business venture. It is now piracy, and it is punished harshly. The soft, wealthy targets that made your ancestors rich are no longer so soft. England, under the rule of Norman kings themselves descended from Vikings, has become a formidable military power. The kingdoms of Europe are learning how to defend themselves. The world is becoming more connected, but in a different way. Trade is replacing raiding as the primary means of acquiring wealth. Great trading towns like Hedeby and Birka are declining, replaced by new centres of commerce that are part of the wider European network. You are no longer a terrifying enigma from the north. You are just another player in a complex economic system. A quirky fringe tidbit is the story of the Varangian Guard. For centuries, many Norsemen, finding their opportunities for raiding, diminished, travelled to Constantinople to serve as elite mercenaries for the Byzantine Emperor. They became legendary for their loyalty and ferocity, a final exotic chapter in the story of the Viking warrior serving a Christian emperor thousands of miles from their homeland. Historians still argue about when the Viking Age officially ended. Some point to the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066, when the English king Harold Godwinson decisively defeated an invading Norwegian army. Others see it as a more gradual cultural and religious transformation that lasted for decades. For you, an old Viking sitting by the fire, it is a palpable loss. The world is becoming more orderly, more predictable, and you feel smaller. The heroic sagas your grandfather told you feel like tales from another world. Your sons are Christian. They are subjects of a king. They think more about grain prices than they do about the call of the sea. The fierce, wild, and violent energy that once set your people upon the world has been tamed. The age of wolves is over. The age of shepherds has begun, and you are not sure you belong in it. The cold grey world of the Norsemen dissolves into a blinding, brilliant light. The scent of salt and pine is replaced by the dry, dusty air of the desert, and the sweet, heavy smell of lotus blossoms on the river. You are no longer a Viking, a peasant, or an emperor. Your sense of self melts away and is reformed under a relentless white-hot sun. You are in ancient Egypt around the year 2550 BCE during the height of the Old Kingdom, and you have been given the single greatest honour and most terrifying burden of your existence. You are a worker tasked with building an eternal home for your god-king the Pharaoh. You are a builder of the pyramids. Forget the Hollywood images of legions of slaves being whipped into submission by cruel overseers. The reality, as modern archaeology has revealed, is far more complex, and in some ways more astonishing. You are not a slave. You are a skilled labourer, a conscripted peasant, a proud Egyptian doing your sacred duty to ensure the stability of the entire cosmos. A mainstream historical fact, based on the excavation of the workers' village near the Giza Plateau, is that the pyramid builders were a well-organised and relatively well-fed workforce. You live in a purpose-built town with barrack-style housing, bakeries and breweries. You are paid not in coin, which has not yet been invented, but in rations, breadfish, and most importantly, beer. Beer is the staple of your diet, a thick, nutritious and calorie-rich slurry that fuels your back-breaking labour. You are part of a massive rotating workforce, likely serving for a few months at a time, especially during the Akhet, the season of the Nile's inundation, when your own fields are flooded and you are unable to farm. But being a free, well-fed labourer does not make the work any less gruelling. Your purpose is to serve the Pharaoh. He is not just a king, he is a living god. the earthly incarnation of Horus, the divine mediator, between the world of mortals and the world of the gods. His well-being is intrinsically linked to the well-being of the entire universe. When he dies, he will journey through the underworld to be reborn as Osiris, the king of the dead, ensuring the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth for all of Egypt. Your task is to build him a resurrection machine, a stone mountain that will serve as his launching pad to the stars. The pyramid is not a tomb in the sense of a final resting place. It is a gateway, an instrument of ascension. The fate of the entire world, the rising of the sun each morning, the flooding of the Nile each year, all of it depends on the successful completion of this sacred project. The pressure is immense. This is not just a construction project. It is an act of worship. Every block you move, every stone you shape is a prayer made solid. The scale of the operation is almost impossible to comprehend. You are one of tens of thousands of workers. The Great Pyramid of Khufu. Your current project will eventually consist of over 2 million stone blocks, some weighing as much as an elephant, all quarried, transported and fitted together with breathtaking precision. You are a tiny cog in a vast, divinely inspired machine. A quirky fringe tidbit is the organisation of the workforce into competing gangs with names like the Drunkards of Menkaura or the Friends of Khufu. These teams divided into smaller groups would often leave graffiti on the stone blocks, marking them with their team's insignia. This wasn't vandalism. It was a mark of pride, a way of signing their work for eternity, and fostering a sense of competitive camaraderie. Historians still argue about the exact methods used to construct the pyramids. How were the massive blocks lifted into place? Was it a single long external ramp, a series of smaller zigzagging ramps, or perhaps an internal ramp that spiraled up inside the structure itself? There are dozens of theories, but no definitive answers. The Egyptians left behind no blueprints, no how-to guides for building a 480-foot-tall mountain of stone. For you, the how is less important than the why. You look up at the colossal structure rising from the desert floor, its sides angling perfectly towards the heavens. You are building eternity. You are securing the cosmic order. You are serving your God. It is the most important work a man can do. And as you pick up your tools under the blazing Egyptian sun, you prepare for another day of moving a mountain one stone at a time. The sun is your relentless overseer, a burning eye in a cloudless sky. Before you can even think about lifting a single block into place on the Great Pyramid, that block must first be torn from the earth. You are now part of a quarrying team stationed miles away from the Giza Plateau, and your work is a symphony of sweatstone and sheer human will. Your tools are not what you might imagine. You do not have iron or steel. Those metals are not yet in common use. Your primary tools are made of harder stone and softer copper. You wield heavy dolerite pounders, rounded balls of extremely hard rock to bash and pulverize the limestone around the block you intend to free. For hours upon endless hours, you and your team relentlessly pound at the rock, chipping away at a trench around the desired block. The rhythmic percussive sound of stone hitting stone echoes across the quarry, a deafening, monotonous beat. The air is thick with a fine white dust that coats your skin, fills your lungs, and makes every breath a gritty effort. Once the trenches are deep enough, you must free the block from its underside. This is where the real ingenuity comes in. You chisel out small slots along the base of the block and drive in wooden wedges. You then soak these wedges with water. Over several hours, the wood absorbs the water and expands with an incredible, irresistible force. With a groan that seems to come from the very bedrock of the earth, a massive multi-ton block of limestone splits from its ancient bed. It is a moment of triumph, a victory of simple physics over geology. Now comes the even harder part, moving it. The block, weighing anywhere from 2 to 15 tons, must be transported from the quarry to the construction site. You and hundreds of other men haul the massive stone onto a large wooden sled. There are no wheels, no beasts of burden strong enough for this task. There is only rope and muscle. You take your place on one of the thick fibrous ropes tied to the front of the sled. An overseer chants a rhythm, and together you pull. The sled grinds over a specially prepared causeway. To reduce friction, a worker walks ahead of the sled, pouring water or as some recent theories suggest, wet sand onto the path. Still, the effort is monumental. Your muscles scream in protest, your feet slip on the slick surface, and the rope cuts into your hands and shoulders. It is a slow, agonizing procession under the cruel sun. A single misstep, a snapped rope could mean disaster, crushing anyone unfortunate enough to be in the sled's path. A mainstream historical fact is that the vast majority of the stone for the Giza pyramids was high-quality limestone quarried right there on the plateau, but the fine white Tura limestone used for the outer casing had to be transported from quarries across the Nile, a significant logistical challenge. The massive granite blocks used for the inner chambers had to be brought all the way from Aswan hundreds of miles to the south on enormous barges. You are not just a brute force labourer. This work requires immense skill and coordination. You must understand geology leverage and teamwork. You learn to read the grain of the stone to know exactly where to strike with your pounder, where to place the wedges. You develop a non-verbal communication with your teammates, a shared understanding of rhythm and strain. A quirky fringe tidbit is the evidence of medical care provided to the workers. Skeletons found in the workers' cemetery show that broken bones were often expertly set and healed, and some skulls even show signs of successful brain surgery. This suggests that you were a valuable asset, an investment worth protecting. Your well-being mattered not out of compassion, but out of pure pragmatic necessity. An injured worker is a useless worker. Historians still debate the precise number of workers involved and the logistics of feeding and housing such a massive long-term workforce. But for you, the debate is irrelevant. Your reality is the weight of the rope, the dust in your throat, and the colossal, unmoving weight of the stone in front of you. You look at the block, a single tiny piece of a divine puzzle, and you know that your day is not done until it rests at the foot of the rising pyramid. And tomorrow, you will do it all over again. Your life, your work, your entire civilization is tethered to a single miraculous force of nature, the River Nile. It is the source of all life in this arid, sun-scorched land. It is your god, your mother, your most unpredictable and dangerous master. You are back on your small plot of land after your season of labour on the Great Pyramid, and you are about to experience the terrifying duality of the Nile's blessing and its curse. For most of the year, the Nile is a placid, life-giving ribbon of blue, cutting through the endless red of the desert. Its waters irrigate your fields of wheat and barley, allowing you to grow a surplus of food in a land that should by all rights be barren. You use a simple but ingenious tool called a shaduf, a long pole with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other, to lift water from the river into your irrigation canals. It's a repetitive, back-breaking task you perform for hours under the sun, but it's the work that keeps your family alive. But once a year in the late summer, the Nile transforms. Fueled by the distant monsoon rains in the Ethiopian highlands, the river begins to swell. This is the Akhet, the inundation. The river overflows its banks, turning the entire Nile Valley into a vast, shallow lake. This annual flood is the miracle upon which your civilization is built. It deposits a thick, rich layer of black silt onto your fields, renewing the soil with essential nutrients. Without this gift of silt, Egyptian agriculture would be impossible. You greet the flood not with fear but with reverence. It is a sign that the cosmic order is intact, that the gods are pleased. But the blessing is also a curse. The flood is a time of immense disruption and danger. You and your family must retreat to higher ground, living in temporary shelters on the edge of the desert, watching as your fields, your home, your entire world disappears beneath the brown, swirling water. The floodwaters are not gentle. They can be violent and unpredictable. A flood that is too high can wash away your village, destroy your grain stores and drown your livestock. A flood that is too low means less silt and less water for the coming year, leading to a poor harvest and the threat of famine. A mainstream historical fact is that the ancient Egyptians kept meticulous records of the Nile's flood levels using nilometers, stone staircases, with marked intervals to measure the height of the inundation, which they used to predict the success of the harvest and set tax rates. And the water itself is filled with threats. The Nile is teeming with crocodiles, enormous predators that lurk just beneath the surface, a constant danger to anyone working near the water's edge. Hippos, though, they look placid, are notoriously aggressive, and are responsible for more human deaths in Africa than almost any other large animal. The stagnant pools of water left behind by the receding flood are a breeding ground for mosquitoes which carry malaria and waterborne parasites, like the schistosome worm, which causes a debilitating chronic illness. A quirky fringe tidbit is that some Egyptian medical texts prescribe remedies like crocodile dung as a contraceptive, a foul-smelling and likely ineffective method that highlights the strange mix of observation and magic in their medicine. Historians still argue about the extent to which the state controlled the irrigation systems. Was it a highly centralized hydraulic empire managed by the pharaoh's bureaucracy, or was it largely a matter of local village-level cooperation? For you, the reality is a constant negotiation with the river. You build and maintain the earthen dikes and canals that channel its water. You work with your neighbors to ensure a fair distribution. As the floodwaters finally recede, leaving behind the precious black soil, you return to your land. The cycle begins anew. You must plough the silted fields, sow your crops, and pray for the right balance of sun and water. You look at the river now, calm and blue again, and you feel both gratitude and fear. It is the source of your life and the source of your death. It is the god that feeds you and the monster that could swallow you whole. You are clever. You show a talent not for lifting heavy stones or pulling on a rope, but for reading and writing. You are chosen from your village to attend a special school to learn the sacred and complex art of the scribe. You have escaped the back-breaking labour of the fields and the quarries. You have traded a life of physical toil for a life of the mind. You are about to discover that this privileged position is its own special kind of mind-numbing, thankless prison. Your training is long and arduous. For years you sit cross-legged, a wooden board on your lap, and practice your craft. You are not learning an alphabet. You are learning hieroglyphs, the sacred carvings, a beautiful but incredibly complex system of hundreds of pictorial signs. You must also master hieratic, a simplified cursive script used for everyday administrative work. Your teacher is strict and discipline is enforced with a cane. A popular Egyptian saying of the time was, "A boy's ear is on his back. He listens when he is beaten." You spend endless hours copying tedious texts, memorizing signs and practicing your brushstrokes on ostraca cheap broken pieces of pottery or limestone flakes. Papyrus, the elegant paper-like material made from the papyrus reed, is far too expensive for a mere student. You copy maxims and moral tales, but mostly you copy administrative forms, tax assessments, grain inventories and legal contracts. This is your future. After years of training, you graduate. You are now a scribe, a member of the educated elite. You wear a clean white linen kilt. You do not have the calloused hands of a farmer or the sunburnt skin of a labourer. You are respected. You are in theory powerful. The bureaucracy that runs the entire kingdom of Egypt from the pharaoh's court down to the smallest village runs on the ink from your brush, and your life is filled with paperwork. So much paperwork. You are assigned to a government department, perhaps the granary or the treasury. Your job is to record everything. You sit in a stuffy, windowless office, a roll of papyrus spread before you, and you write. You record the amount of grain brought in from the harvest, calculating the portion owed to the state temple and the portion owed to the pharaoh's storehouses. You meticulously note every sack, every measure your brush flying across the page in neat columns of hieratic script. It is precise, exacting, and soul-crushingly repetitive. You might be sent out into the fields to assess the land for taxation. You walk alongside a team of rope stretchers, surveyors, who measure the fields after the annual flood. You record the dimensions, calculate the acreage, and determine the amount of grain the farmer will owe. The farmers hate you. You are the face of the taxman, the man whose neat little symbols will determine whether their family has enough to eat for the winter. They plead with you, bribe you, curse you. You must remain aloof, impartial, and accurate. Your numbers are not just numbers, they are the lifeblood of the state. A mainstream historical fact is the sheer scale and complexity of Egyptian bureaucracy. It was one of the earliest and most sophisticated administrative systems in the world, capable of managing massive construction projects, a national economy, and a complex religious system, all without the aid of currency. A quirky fringe tidbit is the scribe's palette. This was your essential toolkit, a rectangular wooden or ivory case, with 2 wells for red and black ink cakes, and a slot to hold your reed brushes. Red ink was used for headings, titles, and important passages, much like we use bolding or italics today. It was a simple but effective piece of information design. Historians still debate the social mobility of scribes. Was it a genuine path to power and influence, or were most scribes simply low-level civil servants trapped in their roles for life? For you, the latter feels more true. Your life is a long, slow river of ink. You record the births, deaths, marriages, and transactions of thousands of people you will never meet. You are the memory of the state, the keeper of its records, but you are utterly anonymous. You have traded the vibrant, if brutal world of physical sensation for a silent, shadowy world of symbols and lists. You have a comfortable life, but a part of you wonders if it is a life at all. Whether you are a farmer, a quarry worker, or a scribe, one single overwhelming preoccupation dominates your entire existence. It is not the harvest, the pharaoh, or the flooding of the Nile. It is death. But in ancient Egypt, death is not an end. It is a transition, a dangerous journey that you must spend your entire life preparing for. The constant shadow of the afterlife shapes every decision you make, every bit of wealth you accumulate, and every prayer you utter. Your core belief is in the multifaceted nature of the soul. You believe that each person has several spiritual components. Most importantly, the K, your life force or spiritual double, and the Bay, your individual personality, often depicted as a human-headed bird. After you die, your BR must be able to return to your body each night to be reunited with your car. If this reunion fails, if your body is destroyed or unrecognizable, you will cease to exist. You will suffer the second death, a complete and utter annihilation from which there is no return. This is why mummification is not a morbid fascination. It is an absolute necessity. It is the single most important preparation you will ever make. The process is a mainstream historical fact, described in detail by the Greek historian Herodotus, and confirmed by modern science. It is a long, expensive, and gruesome procedure. After your death, your body is taken to the wabet, the pure place where the embalmers go to work. They remove your brain through your nostrils using a long iron hook. They make an incision in your side and remove your internal organs, your liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines, which are then dried, wrapped, and placed in 4 special containers called canopic jars. Your heart, believed to be the seat of intelligence and emotion, is left inside your body. Your empty body cavity is then rinsed with palm wine and spices, and packed with natron, a natural salt that acts as a powerful desiccant. The body is buried in a pile of natron for 40 days, until all the moisture is drawn out, leaving behind a shrunken, leathery husk. After this, the body is cleaned, anointed with oils, and carefully wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen bandages. Amulets and magical spells are tucked between the layers of wrapping to protect you on your journey. The entire process takes 70 days, but a preserved body is not enough. Your K will need sustenance in the afterlife, so you must be buried with everything you might need: food, drink, furniture, tools, clothing, and even games. The walls of your tomb, if you can afford one, are covered in painted or carved scenes depicting an idealized version of your life on Earth. These aren't just decorations, they are magical blueprints. It is believed that these images will become real in the afterlife, ensuring that you will have an eternal supply of food servants and pleasant activities. And then there is the journey itself. You must travel through the Duat, the perilous Egyptian underworld which is filled with monstrous demons' gates, guarded by fire-breathing serpents and terrifying challenges. To navigate this, you need a guide, the Book of the Dead. This is not a single book, but a collection of spells, hymns, and passwords written on a papyrus scroll which you purchase and have buried with you. It is your magical GPS for the afterlife. A quirky fringe tidbit is the Shabti doll. These were small figurines placed in the tomb inscribed with a spell that would magically bring them to life to do any manual labour required of you in the afterlife. If you were called upon to plough a field or build a canal, you could simply send your Shabti to do it for you. Wealthy individuals were buried with hundreds of them. Historians still debate how universally these beliefs were held and how affordable these preparations were for the common person. For a poor farmer, a proper mummification and a decorated tomb were impossibly expensive. They might have to settle for a simpler form of preservation and a shallow grave in the desert sands. But the desire was the same. You spend your life saving for your death. The construction of your tomb is more important than the construction of your house. You live in a simple mud brick hovel, but you dream of an eternal home of stone. It is a life lived in constant preparation for a journey you are terrified to take, but even more terrified to miss. The last block of granite has been dragged into the heart of the Great Pyramid. The final gleaming white casing stone, perhaps a capstone of gold or electrum, has been hoisted into place, catching the sun and turning the entire structure into a blazing beacon of divine light. The work is finished. After decades of relentless labour, the pharaoh Khufu's resurrection machine stands complete, a perfect silent mountain of stone on the Giza plateau. A great celebration is held, beer flows freely, and extra rations of bread and meat are distributed to you and the thousands of other workers. There is a sense of collective triumph of a sacred duty fulfilled. But as the celebrations fade and the workforce begins to disperse, returning to their villages and their fields, a profound and echoing silence descends upon the site. You walk around the base of the colossal structure you helped create a single insignificant figure in its immense shadow. You touch the smooth, cool surface of a casing stone, a stone you may have helped quarry or polish, and you are struck by the sheer, overwhelming finality of it all. This entire city of stone, this marvel of engineering and human will, was built for one man, and he is not even here yet. The vast, intricate network of corridors, chambers, and dummy passages inside is dark and empty. It is a home waiting for its sole inhabitant. You have spent a significant portion of your life, your sweat, your strength, your very essence contributing to this place. You have seen men injured, men die, men grow old in its service. And for what? For a silent, empty tomb. The purpose of your life's greatest work is to be sealed away and forgotten. Once the pharaoh dies and his mummified remains are interred deep within the pyramid's heart, the entrance will be plugged with massive granite blocks and camouflaged, intended never to be opened again. The structure is designed not for visitors but for eternity. Its entire function is to be inaccessible, a self-contained universe for a dead king. You will never see the inside. Your children will never see the inside. It is a monument to absence. You think about the incredible knowledge that was required to build this. The precise astronomical alignments, the sophisticated mathematics, the logistical genius of feeding and organising tens of thousands of people. All of it has been poured into this single silent object. Historians today still marvel at the precision of the Great Pyramid. Its base is almost a perfect square. Its sides are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions, and it was built without the aid of modern surveying equipment. It is a testament to a level of skill and dedication that is almost beyond comprehension. A quirky fringe tidbit is the concept of the air shafts, or star shafts, that point from the inner chambers towards the sky. For a long time, these were thought to be for ventilation, but they don't lead to the outer surface of the pyramid and are aligned with specific constellations such as Orion, which the Egyptians associated with the god Osiris. It is now believed they were spiritual conduits, magical launch tubes to propel the pharaoh's soul towards the circumpolar stars, the land of the gods. As you stand there, the wind whipping sand across the plateau, the initial pride you felt begins to curdle into a strange sense of melancholy. You have served your god, you have upheld the cosmic order, but your own life feels small and transient in comparison. You are a mortal who has built a machine for immortality, a man of flesh who has raised a mountain of stone. Your name is not carved anywhere on its surface. Your contribution, along with that of thousands of others, is anonymous, swallowed by the sheer scale of the achievement. You turn your back on the silent pyramid and begin the long walk back to your village. The sun is setting, casting a golden glow on the perfect limestone peak. It is beautiful, eternal, and utterly indifferent. Your life's work is complete, and now it has nothing more to do with you. As the desert grows cool and the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky, the world around you seems to soften. The sharp edges of pyramids and the hard realities of history begin to blur, replaced by the gentle rolling landscape of your own approaching sleep. The echoes of chanting priests and the rhythmic thump of stone on stone fade into a distant, peaceful hum, like the soft whirring of a fan in a quiet room. You have travelled far tonight, from the cold, damp castles of medieval Europe to the sun-drenched banks of the Nile, from the paranoid mind of an emperor to the calloused hands of a peasant. You have worn the robes of power and the rags of the powerless, and you have felt the weight of their worlds. But that weight is lifting now. The stories have been told, the struggles are over, and the long day of history is coming to a close. There are no more dangers to face, no more feuds to settle, no more tombs to build. There is only the stillness of this moment, a quiet harbour, after a long and turbulent voyage. Let the current of sleep gently pull you away from the shore of wakefulness. Let the stories dissolve into dreams and allow the silence to cradle you, to hold you, to ease you into a deep and restful peace. The journey is over. It is time to rest.